you touched on this briefly on Weird Games on Thursday, and I wanted to talk about it more, so I'm glad we're here now. Where are you at with the Chiefs cornerbacks who are not named Trent McDuffie?
I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't think the coaching staff does either.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
5 things to watch here on KC Sports Network, getting you ready for Chiefs Lions on Saturday. I'm Kent Swanson. I'm here to give you a couple things. You're also going to hear from the fellas at Only Weird Games. You're going to hear from that football show as well, Tucker D. Franklin and Matt Verderame, all getting you something or some things to watch as the Chiefs play preseason game number 2. This is typically, I think the game that you see Patrick Mahomes the most. You're not going to see him in week 3 of the preseason. This is the most reps that you're going to see the first teamers in the first team offense specifically. And that takes me to thing number 1 on the offensive side of the ball. I am looking at the wide receiver rotations playing with Patrick Mahomes. It's been reported that Patrick Mahomes will play this first half of the game. Probably not going to see him for the entirety of that first half. He'll still get some reps for sure. You're still going to get plenty of Mahomes snaps for this game, but it's not going to be a full half. Kind of like they said Patrick Mahomes was going to play a full quarter against the Jacksonville Jaguars and winds up playing 1 possession and moving on. So this is going to be, a quarter and a half, we'll call it. And I would anticipate that the Chiefs probably defer just to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field a little bit more than they'd like to. Like, I think this is a game, like, even if they were a team that liked to take the ball, they'd probably just defer anyway, just to kind of limit the reps that you see Patrick Mahomes. Get him some work, get him in there, and then get him out. And I think that's going to be the case. But the receivers around him in that limited time that we're going to see in the quarter and a half, whatever it winds up being, I'm paying attention to. We saw Sky Moore get the opportunity right out of the injury to Hollywood Brown. Does that sustain? Does that continue? It kind of seems like that's the direction they're heading. This team feels comfortable and confident with Sky Moore's knowledge of the offense at this point. His 3rd year into it. Maybe he hasn't always been consistent processing things post-snap, but it seems like he has a good understanding of multiple positions on the field, can run the route as they're designed on paper, and maybe it's just a little bit of the route adjustments that you might have to make from time to time that has kind of kept him from finding consistency in the NFL. But I look, and where Sky Moore and how much he plays and how quickly he's off the field, I think is something worth paying attention to. But I'm also seeing if we get a look at a Nico Remigio, if we get a look at a Justin Ross getting opportunities with Patrick Mahomes in this sample size, if they're trying to give these guys some sustained looks, just to get an idea of what they're going to expect, and if they can kind of help figure out this rotation and or 53-man roster, wide receiver 6-7, like trying to stack this room out and figure out who's ultimately going to make this roster come cut down day. So I think who gets the snaps is almost more important than what gets done with them. So if Justin Ross is seeing a little more heavy workload than we're used to, worth paying attention to. If Nico Remigio is getting some run, worth paying attention to. I think the same could be said for Carson Steele too, in some capacity as well. So I'm just fascinated to see who lines up at the receiver spot. I think that's a very important key to starting to get an idea of where this thing's heading with the 53-man roster. Thing number 2 on the defensive side of the ball, it remains Felix Anudike-Uzomah. Like, this is a big opportunity again for him to stack plays on what he did in week 1. And it was a little bit of up and down for him. I think you kind of saw some of the things that Steve Spagnuolo profiled as things that he really needs to improve upon to see the field more consistently, to take that next step. Talking about the physicality, the pass rush plan. And those things definitely still remain to be seen and are in our work in progress, even though we got a pretty heavy workload of Felix Anudike-Uzomah in the first game. He played 3 quarters, and I think he showed the athletic ability that got him drafted at the end of the first round. Like, definitely saw some really, impressive movement skills. He did some good things on some stunts. He had a couple really nice rushes too. Like, he was able to turn a corner really nice and threaten up the arc and then turn a corner. I still think, there's some hand technique that requires a lot more work and development. And, I think there's just, from a pass rush plan perspective, he's got to start stringing some things together and building off of, that speed rush. And I think we're still kind of waiting to see that reveal itself. But it was good to see him get reps and do some impressive things. There's a chance he's going to get to play against, maybe a more advanced skill set, group at the tackle position for the Detroit Lions in this second game. And he needs to maximize it. He needs to continue to show that he's getting better. He needs to continue to show that he's making strides and improvements, and make some splash plays, make some impact plays. It's been kind of up and down from the physicality perspective, and I think you kind of saw that he struggled pretty significantly in the run game in this last game against the Jaguars, and I want to see an improvement on that. He was going up against tight ends that are fighting to make the Jaguars roster and was on the losing end in the blocking game. So how can he can he take a next step? He got a lot of reps this last week. Can he respond? Can he take a step with regard to how physical he is at the point of attack? If he can show a better base, a better lower half, some more play strength, better leverage in the run game. Like, those are little things that he needs to show, because we've said it this week, but Steve Spagnuolo, you have to earn the right to rush the passer, and that can mean both, when sets of downs, but it also can mean opportunities on the field. And you're going to get more opportunities on the field if you are someone that can play the run early downs, first and second down. If you're able to stay on the field and show that, you can be a 3-down type player, it's going to give you more opportunities to make plays in the passing game. Right now, it kind of feels like Felix Anudike-Uzomah's penciled into a situational pass rusher, a guy that's going to see the field on third downs, be an athlete, execute some of these stunts because they want to leverage and maximize that athletic ability, that ability to slip into a gap from out wide, and hopefully run some speed rushes up the arc. But I think outside of that, you're probably going to trust a Malik Herring at this point to play on early downs against the run. So I think he's kind of cornering himself into a kind of a niche position, which is fine. It's just you're hoping to see him continue to take steps. This is a guy that they have under control for the next 3 years after this year, if they want him. And you want to see him continue to take steps, because 2025 and 2026 are really important to this Chiefs team to have their first round defensive end be an impact player on the roster. So hopefully he continues to take more steps. Hopefully he can expand his role in 2024. And I think this game, getting more reps, getting opportunities against the Detroit Lions, could be a valuable asset for him and a value opportunity for him as he's continuing his NFL career. Let's hear from the fellas at Only Weird Games about their things to watch.
Thank you, Kit. Back like we never left. I feel like the preseason is for all of us getting on the same page. Joshua Briscoe and Nate Taylor from Only Weird Games here with you to give you two of our things that we're going to be looking forward to in the Chiefs' second preseason game against the Detroit Lions. Nate, we're splitting sides of the football. We're going defense first. You touched on this briefly on Weird Games on Thursday, and I wanted to talk about it more, so I'm glad we're here now. Where are you at with the Chiefs' cornerbacks who are not named Trent McDuffie?
I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't think the coaching staff does either. So this is really one of the major things to watch in this preseason game against the Detroit Lions. I mean, we don't think we're going to see Jalen Watson because he's still coming back from his the surgery he had on his shoulder. And then, Joshua Williams kind of didn't have a great game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, so it's not like he took the reins on having a lead for the second cornerback spot. I think from a heartfelt, nice storyline is Najee Johnson. He didn't obviously play at any point last year because of the torn ACL, so this will be his first game in over, a year and a half, essentially. But he has not had a great camp either. And there's Kelvin Joseph just like floating around. I don't know. Let's not talk about Kamal Hatton, Josh, because he was bad. He was really bad against the Jaguars. I mean, it can only go up from here, Kamal. But the point is, as I said on the show on Only Weird Games, the Chiefs have a much better safety situation than they do cornerback, which is so unusual for them. But it's one of the reasons why Chamari Connor is probably their nickel defender, because they have at least some stability with him and McDuffie. It's just I don't know who that second cornerback is going to be when they're in, base personnel. So if any of these guys play well, I guess we should take that as a sign that that person should probably be on the field against the Baltimore Ravens on September 5th.
It's a shockingly enormous position that we have spent shockingly little time talking about because the Chiefs have always found answers at corner. There's always been, and I mean, look, I'm not even saying that the group you just mentioned there as anyone as talented as L'Jarius Sneed, but we have gotten so comfortable with the Spags Dave Merritt combo to find competent quarterback play that I've been under the assumption, and I think right now I still am under the assumption that they will get quality play from somewhere. But the fact that none of those guys separated over the course of camp is pretty concerning. That's what I honestly expected. I expected today, by the end of it, even with Boston coming back from the surgery, somebody here is going to be pretty clearly the second guy behind McDuffie, and then you can kind of shuffle everybody else. The fact that you never saw anybody separate at camp is legitimately concerning.
Yeah, and the fact that they just kept rotating somebody with the first team, right? Like, hey, it'll be Joshua Williams today. Actually, scratch that. Now it's Najee Johnson, but he, had a little injury pop up. So now it's Kelvin Joseph. Oh, wait, he got a hamstring injury. Now it's back to Joshua Williams for the preseason game. Nope, swap that. Joshua Williams is now with the twos. Jalen Watson was probably the one who got the most reps in training camp this past week, but he's not going to play. So, again, who does Dave Merritt like? Who does he trust? And right now, there's not really an answer there. So, if the Detroit Lions backups do well on offense, particularly at the receiver position, it will only make this issue grow larger as we get closer to the start of the season.
We need to just make sure we put a pin in that. We'll talk about that more on Tuesday because I think that's going to end up being something we can really make a little takeaway from. I'll go to a position group that had a similar problem throughout camp in terms of nobody really separating as the second guy of the unit and really conversations about the third guy in the unit. And that's what the Chiefs running backs. I know it's funny that I've spent so much of my breath over the course of this offseason talking about the value of building some running back depth. But that's always kind of been the conversation, right? You want to have enough guys who are tall enough to ride this ride and keep that water level even for your offense. And right now, we haven't seen anybody other than Isaiah Pacheco show that they can do that. Even going back through last season, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the guy, the offense lost a gear. It lost an element of the offense and confidence you could have in your running back there. Plus, in pass protection, which is something that I think we have rightly talked about a lot on this show over the years. I don't know who Patrick Mahomes trusts. I don't know who Andy Reid trusts. And I don't know if there's anyone who has earned that trust other than probably Pacheco, who it's not like he didn't enter the league as a third down pass protecting guy, but man, you saw every one of those Pacific Rim battles between him and Drew Tranquill. I trust Isaiah Pacheco as RB1 implicitly. That's great. When Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's been battling illness throughout the last couple of weeks in particular, so we'll see how much that affects him, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the second preseason game, even behind the second line and with some illness issues, he had no juice. There was nothing popped on his limited reps. And then down the rest of the depth chart, obviously we've spent the most time talking about Carson Steele since that first preseason game. Mm-hmm. If the Chiefs do end up keeping 4 running backs, allowing Steele to do some flexible stuff as a fullback, that's one thing. But right now, I wonder if he's not the second runner on this team as a running back right now. It's reacting to a very small sample size against a lower level of competition and a more even trench situation than, let's say, Clyde had. The only thing I remember Andy Reid talking about from Deneric Prince's day was that 34 was supposed to field that kickoff that turned into a safety. So I was kind of I was hopeful for Keontae Ingram. He was the guy that Brett Veach mentioned early in the offseason. That appears to not be happening. Amani Bailey, the undrafted free agent, along with Steele, that appears to not be happening.
Yeah.
It seems like there's only 4 guys in that group who are getting any touches. Plus, I will say, I think we saw enough to this point that Louis Rees-Zammit is not a 53-man roster NFL player right now, which is understandable considering that he's played 1 NFL football game, and that was, I think, three offensive touches. I am keeping an eye on him in this game also, and I hope we see him get 15 touches in the third game when it's all of the guys that just need the reps out there. With Reese Zammit, his first carry looked indecisive and not very explosive, and, a lot of things you would look like on your first NFL touch.
Ever.
That is not me dropping the guillotine on my hopes for LRZ's NFL career. It's just logical. It just makes sense that that's how it went for him. I want to see him get more work and see if that growth continues, and then I think it's more likely that we're talking about him again this time next year. But if he does get real work over the next 2 games and ends up on the practice squad and gets some touches on scout team or whatever over the course of this season, maybe in week 14 the Chiefs are like, hey, our running back room has gotten thin. There was an injury. No one's performed that well. We see some. I would be, if Louis Rees-Zammit ever suits up in a Chiefs uniform this year, that's a success. If he suits up next year, that's probably still a success.
Yes.
I want to see him play in the preseason, but it's less important than seeing, can Carson Steele replicate what he did in week 1? Does Clyde see the field and get a little bit of work with the first team line? Does he look any better there if he's even out there? Again, with the illness, he hasn't been practicing through the end of training camp. And can Deneric Prince show us something that might meet a little bit of the hype that he got during last training camp, kind of following in the wake of Isaiah Pacheco as, maybe this kind of big, aggressive runner? Never materialized for Prince last year. Where do you handicap that group right now?
Yeah, I think you hit it correctly, because everything that's gone on leads to tell you that, like, Isaiah Pacheco is going to have a gigantic workload ahead of him in the regular season, just because he is the best pass protector. He is the best runner with the football. Obviously, his hands have improved in terms of receiving out of the backfield. I don't think we need to see a ton from Carson Steele, other than can they get him a couple actual snaps at fullback, because that was not the case in Jacksonville last week. And then lastly, Josh, for me, this is really the last game to evaluate Deneric Prince, because if it's much of the same, or if there's not a clear, highlights, hey, he really popped on tape, then I think it could lead the Chiefs to say maybe we need to be one of those teams on the waiver wire trying to either, sign another player at the running back position who could maybe give them a little bit more, change of direction, a little bit more juice, or do they try to execute a small trade before the cutdown day on August 27th? Because right now I think they only have 2 real runners, and it's Isaiah Pacheco and Carson Steele. Like, that was not the way this was supposed to go. So if they want to have 3 viable running backs, then Deneric Prince really needs to have a much better game than he showed against the Jaguars.
I do think it says something about us that we are talking about things right now that we were talking about in March. As the pieces were coming together, it's like, all right, well, if Snead's on his team, who's stepping up? How does that shake out? And man, it sure does feel like this team only really has one running
back.
We're kind of still there. So those are 2 of our things to watch, both in week 2 of the preseason and, frankly, for the next 20 or so weeks of your football-loving life. So we'll hand it back over to Tucker D. Franklin. The D stands for definitely going to handle this transition.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Appreciate it, Josh. That football show, hanging out with you guys here. Tucker Franklin, Matt Verderam. We're going to be talking about the beef of the week usually on this show, sponsored by Batchelder Family Farms. Because, look, they got some great beef there, and we're going to talk about great beefs all throughout the season. But this week, it only makes sense when we're talking about beef to talk about the offensive line, Matt. A lot of storylines kind of going into this one. First, I guess let's start with who's not going to play, right? Jawan Taylor gets his shoulder nicked up a little bit. Wanya Morris has been dealing with a knee bone bruise. That's not very comfortable. I would not like to have a knee bone bruise. And Joe Tooney's obviously coming back from that torn pec. Probably not going to push him a whole lot. He's been trading in reps. So there's 3 guys that, are going to be pretty reliable on that starting offensive line that are not going to be playing against the Detroit Lions this Saturday.
So I'm thinking that quick game's probably a good idea this weekend. I I wouldn't exactly be hitting a 7-step drop and trying to create magic down the field here.
Right.
Without Jawan Taylor, and then Morris as he works through this stuff, like it's Lucas Niang at right tackle, I would imagine, and good old Kingsley Suamataia, who's at left tackle anyway. And then you have Humphrey and Smith and Caliendo, which is the trio inside, and we'll see if Tootie gets some reps. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I'm watching, let's be real, is Kingsley. I mean, I know Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey are pretty good. I've got a pretty good idea. And I know Joe Tooney's pretty good. So, Lucas Niang is their third string right tackle. Like, if he gets beat like a drum, I kind of figured.
Yep.
So, it's really about watching Suamataia. I am not concerned about anybody else on the line. I would like to see Caliendo play well just because he's probably like their first guy off the bench for the interior. And the rest of the guys off the interior, we mentioned that this is a beef of the week. It was rancid beef last week, watching the second team interior. That was an atrocity. So I'd like to see Caliendo play well, but obviously Kingsley's the guy I've got my eye on the most.
I think what's really interesting about Kingsley, especially for last week, he played like 6 snaps and 2 of them were actually pass pro reps. It's just like a rookie at this stage, it seems like you would want to get him reps at left tackle, right? Even if it is Carson Wentz back there, you would think that they would want to leave and at least have Carson Wentz, on the other hand, take snaps with the first team offensive line. But I think Nate made this point on Only Weird Games this week. That starting offensive line, supposedly the projected starting offensive line is going to have like 0 reps together when it comes down to the opening of the season. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, especially for a rookie. He's going to have Joe Tooney next to him, which I do think really helps. And Joe Tooney has been back at practice. He has been cycling in on those team reps, which are the most important reps during those practice. So he's been getting in there. But like all of those guys together going to have 0 total game reps, which you can't really replicate in practice.
No, you can't. And there's truth in that. Like, look, the reality is, Suamataia is a rookie, and his first game is going to be under the bright lights on national TV in less than 3 weeks. Preseason helps, but it's not quite that. And then, look, the other 4 guys all played together last year.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really concerned about it. They know each other. They know how to play alongside each other. But yeah, like, Suamataia, again, not to go back to him, it's just the truth. Like, he's the guy you're looking at. First of all, he's Mahomes' blind side. I would imagine early in the year, even if they love the way he's playing, they're going to chip a lot on that side.
Yeah.
They're going to keep it back and over there. Like, you have to almost. You can't. Like, I can't imagine that they're just going to go, yeah, listen, I'm just going to give you 40 snaps one-on-one with a guy. Like, not a great idea. The good news for Suamataia is really the first couple weeks of the year, like, you do have Trey Hendrickson week 2.
Right.
And we'll see, how much he matches up specifically with him. But he's the one lone, like, big edge rusher that the Bengals have.
Mm-hmm.
The Ravens lost Clowney.
Yep.
They don't have a great edge rush. Like, their biggest pass rushers inside with Matabike.
Mm-hmm.
Now week 3, all of a sudden, Matthew Judon's on the Falcons. And then week 4, of course, you have Mack and Bosa. So, like, it's not like he's not going to be tested, but I do think that you're going to get some help. Week 1 is probably you're not going to be seeing TJ Watt, so that helps. But the rest of the line's played together for a while, so I do think that kind of buffers what could be a little bit of a turbulent situation early.
You mentioned Mike Caliendo early. He had been he's been doing a lot of the Nick Allegretti role. I think we can honorarily dub it the Nick Allegretti role just because of his role in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
He's just the swing interior guy because Nick Allegretti could play any position on that interior offensive line. Mike Caliendo in that role. Hunter Norzad also trying to do the Mike Caliendo role. Now I'm dubbing it the Mike Caliendo role because he's trying to be Mike Caliendo. What was to Alex to Allegretti last year. So he's trying to be the second interior guy, and he did not have a great showing in the first game. Look, sometimes things just happen fast. It's a quick game, and it's a big jump up from the level, but he wasn't necessarily going up against a defensive line that I would consider the most fierce that he would face on the schedule, but I don't know, is that room to improve? We'll put it that way. Same thing with the twos on this offensive line as well. We mentioned it early. Carson Wentz came in with the 2 offensive line, didn't get any reps with the 1 offensive line, which I thought was kind of interesting because they usually let the second quarterback get at least a drive in with the 1 offensive line. But I'm curious to Matt, what are you looking for kind of from the twos to feel maybe a little bit better going into this third preseason game? Better than we felt coming out of the first one.
I mean, I'd look for them to block the other team.
Yeah,
that would be a great start.
Great point.
Because last time they basically just locked arms and went skipping into the backfield together. I mean, that was essentially the level of resistance that they put up. I mean, I know this sounds like really dumb analysis, but it's true. Like, they need to look competent. Like, they need to be able to, hey, look, man, if it's a pass play, like, give the guy 2.5, 3 seconds. If it's a run play, open up a crease. I thought they were better in the run game than they were in the pass game, but they weren't good neither. Like, they really, I mean, even Carson Steele's run was basically because Carson Steele turned into an Avenger and ran to 20 guys like he was on fire. I mean, it wasn't like, oh my God, they blocked this up perfectly and he hit a crease. I mean, they need to show that the Jacksonville game was a teaching tape and a learning experience, and it wasn't just like, this is who they are. Right. Because if it's who they are, they've got a big damn problem. Like, to the point, honestly, if I'm Brett Beach, if that's who they are, I think you've got to either sign somebody off waivers or you've got to make small trade. Because you don't need 3 great backup offensive linemen. But to your point, like, you do need a Nick Allegretti. Yeah. You need a Cam Irving. You need somebody who, hey, man, if that guy's got to play for 3 weeks, our season's not over. Like, think, and for those who say, oh, come on, it's not that big of a deal. Think about how important Nick Allegretti was to them last season. If Nick Allegretti's not on that team last year, I would posit they don't win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like, they needed Nick Allegretti. Nick Allegretti with 1 arm in the Super Bowl was better than anything they're trotting out right now as backups. And so I'd like to see him play a lot better, and that's why I said earlier, too, I'd like to see Mike Caliendo play well because, let's be real, right now, he's the first guy off the bench.
Yeah.
And so if he plays well, then that at least alleviates a little concern of like, all right, well, at least maybe he's Allegretti. And then you go forward from there. But, the backup interior last week was brutal. I mean, there's no other way of putting it.
Yeah. Looking ahead here, Matt, as we, in the third preseason game, we're not going to see the starters probably at all. We won't see the starters at all, so we'll get a good look at the 2s, 3s, and 4s there. But look, cutdown day coming up at the end of August 27th, I believe, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Looking at this offensive line here, how many do you think they take?
I mean, history would say that they keep like 9.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say 9. I would say, look, we know the starting 5 are, right? So you have that. Caliendo.
Right.
Norzad's going to make the team. I'm shocked if he doesn't make the team.
I agree.
1 A. Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And then is it Hansen? Is it Niang? I'll say it's Niang.
I agree.
That would be my 9. Those would be my 9.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think you can get Hansen off waivers. And I think
right. You can get him to your practice squad.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the rationale there. I do think it is 9 too, especially with like the roster crunches that are happening other offensive positions, like with wide receiver and running back. Are they going to keep 4 running backs? Even though I know we're talking about beef and we're talking about offensive linemen, I'm not too comfortable with the 4 running backs that the Chiefs have on the roster. I'd like them to add a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Talent? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think talent. I think talent was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
But I was trying to kind of soften the blow on that a little bit. But yeah, I think that right now, like when you're trying to look at there, I think 9 is the number for the Chiefs offensive line, and it makes the most sense for Niang to be that cutoff with Hansen on the bubble. If they do keep 10, I wouldn't be surprised if Hansen was the
right
was the 10th guy that they keep,
yeah.
because they like him. spent a draft pick on him. They could have UDFA'd him, but they liked him so much that they spent a draft pick on him this last year. But Matt, appreciate you hopping on, talking some beef with me. We love talking beef, presented by our friends at Batch Elder Family Farms. Go check them out. Kent, I'm going to send it back to you. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up.
All right, that is going to do it for 5 things to watch here on KC Sports Network. Thank you all so much for listening, for watching, for supporting. Can't wait to see what happens against the Detroit Lions. Hopefully these things are things you can pay attention to during the game. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later.